I used to believe love was like those home renovation shows, messy and chaotic at first, but destined for a beautiful reveal in the final act. That was before I found out my husband had been renovating our marriage into his own personal profit scheme. My name is Zariah, and 3 months ago I thought I was living my dream life. Harrison and I were celebrating the completion of our dream home renovation, a stunning colonial revival that we'd poured our hearts, souls, and my entire inheritance into transforming. "To us," Harrison had said that night, clinking his wineglass against mine as we sat on our new hardwood floors, surrounded by empty paint cans and the lingering scent of fresh varnish. To the next chapter. I remember how the sunset painted golden streaks across his face, how his smile seemed to hold all the promises we'd made since our wedding day 4 years ago. "I can't believe we actually did it," I said, leaning into his shoulder. "Aunt Luna would have loved to see this." "She'd be proud of how you handled her inheritance," he replied, squeezing my hand. "Speaking of which, did you transfer the final payment to the contractors?" I nodded. "All 7 figures, just like we discussed. The last wire went through yesterday." "Perfect timing." He kissed my forehead, but now, when I replay that moment, I catch the calculated precision in his gesture. The bank needed everything squared away before finalizing the loan restructure. "Still wish you'd let me put my name on the deed," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "It feels weird having poured my entire inheritance into a house that's technically just yours. It's just paperwork, baby. You know I had to keep it this way for the commercial loans." He stood up, stretching. "Besides, what's mine is yours, right?" Wrong. The next morning, I was humming in our brand new kitchen, making coffee in the fancy machine Harrison had insisted we needed, when he walked in wearing his business meeting suit, the one he only wore for closing major deals. "We need to talk," he said, placing a manila envelope on our quartz countertop. I remember how the coffee machine's steam hissed, filling the silence between us. "About what?" "I'm filing for divorce." The mug slipped from my hand, shattering against the Italian tile we'd spent weeks selecting together. "What?" "Harrison, if this is a joke—" "It's not." His voice was ice-cold, clinical. "My lawyer has prepared everything. You'll need to vacate the premises within 30 days. "Vacate the—" "Harrison, I put my entire inheritance into this house, over $1 million. He smiled then, and it wasn't the smile I'd fallen in love with. It was the smile of a predator who'd finally cornered its prey. "The house is in my name. The renovation contracts are in my name. You freely gave me the money. We have the wire transfers to prove it. Legally, you're walking away with what you came in with." "Which is?" "Your car and whatever personal items you can prove you purchased yourself." He straightened his tie. "I'm late for a meeting. Don't try to contact me. Direct all communication through Charlie, my lawyer." He left me standing there, coffee spreading across our perfect floors like a dark stain, my entire world crumbling around me. That evening, numb and shell-shocked, I sat in my best friend Jayla's apartment, staring at my phone as she paced furiously. "He played you," she fumed. "He played you from the start. All that renovation talk, getting you to invest everything." "I know," I whispered. "And you let him keep the house in his name. Girl, what were you thinking?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, a text message with an image attached. My hand shook as I opened it. The photo was slightly blurry, but clear enough. Harrison at some upscale restaurant, his hand intimately covering someone else's. A woman with sleek blonde hair. The timestamp in the corner, 3 months into our renovation. "Who is she?" Jayla demanded, looking over my shoulder. "I don't know." But I was already scrolling through my mental Rolodex of every business meeting, every late night at the office, every networking event he'd attended without me. "But I'm going to find out." Another text came through. "Thought you should know. He's been planning this for a while. Check the permits filed under Elhart Industries." "Zariah," Jayla said softly, "what are you going to do?" I looked up at her, something cold and determined settling in my chest where my heart used to be. "I'm going to take back everything he stole from me, and then I'm going to burn his perfect little world to the ground." Moving from a custom-designed dream home to a one-bedroom apartment felt like being shoved back into a smaller, darker version of my life. The walls seemed to close in as I unpacked the few boxes Harrison's lawyer had generously allowed me to take. "Stop moping and look at this," Jayla said, barging in without knocking. She'd been doing that a lot lately, probably afraid I'd spend too much time alone with my thoughts. She slapped a stack of papers on my tiny kitchen counter. "What am I looking at?" "Bank statements. I pulled some strings at the firm." She pointed to a series of highlighted numbers. "These transfers don't make sense. The amounts are too neat, too regular. It's like someone was siphoning money," I finished, remembering Aunt Luna's voice in my head. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out her old leather journal from my emergency go bag. "Your aunt's diary?" Jayla raised an eyebrow. "Listen to this entry from 2 years ago. Watched Harrison review the contractor bids today. The way he handles money reminds me of Robert. Always too smooth, too practiced. I pray I'm wrong about him, for Zariah's sake." I closed the journal. Robert was her ex-husband who tried to steal her business in the 90s? Smart woman, your aunt. A knock at the door interrupted us. My sister Simone stood there, looking perfectly put together as always. "Please, Zariah, honey." She hugged me tight, her expensive perfume almost suffocating. "I came as soon as I heard. What a nightmare." "Thanks for coming," I said, stepping back. Something felt off about her enthusiasm. "You know what you need to do?" Simone perched on my second-hand couch like it might bite her. "Just move on, start fresh. Maybe this is Karma's way of saying that money was never really meant for you anyway." I froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Well," she twisted her rings nervously, "you know Aunt Luna was different near the end, making strange decisions, changing her will so suddenly." "Simone," I cut her off, "if you're here to argue about the inheritance again—" No, I'm here to help." She stood up quickly. "I just think you should focus on healing instead of whatever this is." She gestured at the papers spread across my counter. Jayla, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Actually, we're meeting someone who might be able to help with whatever this is in about—" She checked her phone. "20 minutes. You're welcome to join us, Simone." My sister's smile tightened. "Rain check. I have a lunch date." She hugged me again, whispering, "Don't do anything rash, okay?" After she left, Jayla turned to me. "Something's not right with her. She's just being Simone," I sighed, always thinking she deserved Aunt Luna's money more than me. "No, it's something else. But never mind that now. We need to go meet Ishmael." Ishmael turned out to be a forensic accountant who worked out of a small office above a Vietnamese restaurant. His desk was a fortress of monitors and financial documents. "These are the renovation payment records?" he asked, scanning through files on his main screen. "Everything I could access," I confirmed. "Harrison kept most of the paperwork for tax purposes." Ishmael's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Interesting pattern here. 5 major wire transfers, each one coinciding with a renovation milestone. But look at the routing numbers." He pointed to a sequence of digits. "These aren't going to contractors. They're being routed through a series of shell companies before landing in offshore accounts." "Can you trace them?" Jayla asked. "Given time." He adjusted his glasses. "But what's more interesting is the timing. These transfers started exactly 2 weeks after you received your inheritance." My stomach churned. He was planning this from the beginning. "Most likely." Ishmael pulled up another screen. And there's something else. These accounts, they're linked to a company registered to someone named L. Hart. The mysterious text message flashed in my mind. L. Hart Industries. How much? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Based on these transactions? Ishmael looked up at me. Just over $500,000. The room spun slightly. I gripped the edge of his desk to steady myself. I need everything, I said. Every transaction, every paper trail, every connection you can find, whatever it costs. Ishmael nodded slowly. Give me 3 days. As Jayla and I left the office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. You'll want to see who your husband had dinner with last night. I opened my email to find a photo attachment. The same blonde woman from the previous picture, now crystal clear, walking out of an upscale restaurant with Harrison. The caption read, Lucy Hart, Executive Assistant, Gibson Development. L. Hart. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and the picture they formed made my blood boil. I didn't plan to confront Harrison at his office, but when I saw him through the glass walls of Gibson Development, lounging at his desk like nothing had changed, something snapped inside me. Ma'am, you can't, his receptionist started, but I was already pushing through the door. $500,000, Harrison. My voice was steady, surprising even me. That's what you and Lucy were worth. He looked up slowly, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Figure what out? That you've been stealing my money? That you've been sleeping with your assistant? Executive assistant, he corrected, standing up. And Lucy understands the value of strategic partnerships. Unlike you, who just handed over your inheritance like a child giving away candy. The door opened behind me. Lucy Hart herself walked in, freezing when she saw me. She was younger than I expected, probably fresh out of college when Harrison hired her. Oh, she said, clutching her tablet. Should I come back? No, stay. Harrison's smile turned cruel. Zariah was just leaving. Like hell I am. I turned to Lucy. Did he promise you everything? The house? The happy ending? Because that was my role 6 months ago. Lucy's perfectly maintained composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. The prenup, I said, turning back to Harrison. I want it. He laughed. The one that was destroyed in that unfortunate pipe burst 2 years ago. Good luck finding it. A memory hit me like lightning. Aunt Luna's voice, stern and insistent. Always keep copies, Zariah, especially of things men tell you not to worry about. We'll see about that, I said, heading for the door. I stopped next to Lucy. When he's done with you, don't say nobody warned you. Back in my apartment, I dug through my boxes until I found Aunt Luna's old key ring. The storage unit key was still there, small and brass and potentially worth everything. You really think your aunt kept a copy? Jayla asked over the phone. She kept everything, said you never know when paper becomes power. I grabbed my car keys. Meet me there. The storage facility was on the outskirts of town, a maze of identical metal doors. Unit 247 looked exactly as it had the day we cleared out Luna's house, down to the heavy padlock. Jayla arrived as I was struggling with the key. Let me help before you break it. Inside, boxes lined the walls in perfect order, each labelled in Luna's precise handwriting. It took us 20 minutes to find the one marked LP Holdings, legal. Eek, here, Jayla said, pulling out a thick manila envelope. Holy shit, Zariah! Inside was our prenuptial agreement, perfectly preserved, with a post-it note in Luna's handwriting. If he ever tries to play you, Zariah, flip the board. This changes everything, Jayla whispered, scanning the document. The house, the investments, the renovation costs. It's all covered. He can't touch any of it without proving he didn't commit fraud. Underneath the prenup was a letter dated just weeks before Luna died. My dearest Zariah, I've watched Harrison these past months, The way he eyes your inheritance reminds me too much of men who see women as banks to rob. I pray I'm wrong, but if I'm right and you're reading this, remember, revenge is a dish best served with paperwork. All my love, Luna. We need to get this to a lawyer, Jailer said. Like yesterday. My phone buzzed, a text from Simone. Having coffee with Harrison. He's really upset about how things ended. Maybe you two should talk. Don't respond, Jailer warned, reading over my shoulder. Something's not right with her sudden interest in playing peacemaker. I know. I tucked the prenup and letter safely in my bag. But first, we need to make copies, lots of copies. As we left the storage unit, another text came through, this time from Harrison. Whatever you think you found, it won't help. You're not smart enough for this game, baby. Never were. I showed Jailer the message. She snorted. Men really never learn, do they? No, I said, thinking of Luna's words, flipped the board. But they're about to. We drove to Jailer's office to make copies, the prenup safe in my bag like a loaded gun. For the first time since Harrison served me divorce papers, I felt something other than pain. I felt dangerous. You know what this means? Jailer asked as we pulled into her office parking lot. We're going to war. I thought about Harrison's smirk, about Lucy's practiced innocence, about Simone's suspicious texts. No, I corrected her. We're going to win. I found the prenup, I told Simone over coffee at her favourite overpriced cafe. Her spoon clinked against her cup, a tiny sound that seemed to echo between us. You what? She blinked rapidly, her perfectly manicured hand frozen mid-stir. Where? Aunt Luna's storage unit. She kept a copy of everything. The storage unit? Simone's voice rose slightly. But isn't that breaking and entering? It's my storage unit now. Luna left it to me, remember? Right. She pulled out her phone, fingers moving quickly. Of course. Simone, I leaned forward. Who are you texting? No one. She shoved her phone into her purse. Just my reminder app. So, what are you planning to do with the prenup? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Harrison's lawyer, Charlie. Miss Pearson, his voice dripped with false concern. I understand you've been breaking into private property to obtain allegedly legal documents. I caught Simone's eye across the table. She looked away. The storage unit belongs to me, Charlie. Check the inheritance documents. Nevertheless, any documents you've acquired won't hold up in court, and Harrison is prepared to press charges for theft if necessary. I ended the call and stood up slowly. You told him? Zariah, please. Simone reached for my hand. Harrison's just trying to protect what's his. He told me about your emotional state lately. My emotional state? I yanked my hand away. He stole my inheritance. He said you gave it to him freely. She lowered her voice as other customers turned to stare. And maybe he deserved it more. What were you going to do with all that money anyway? Why are you on his side? Because he offered me a deal. The words burst out of her like she couldn't hold them anymore. 20% of the property value once it sells. He said I deserved something after Luna cut me out. The cafe seemed to spin around me. You sold me out for a commission? It's not like that. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail notification from an unknown number. I played it on speaker, Luna's voice filling the space between us. Zariah, if you're hearing this, I've passed on, and if Simone ever sides with him, know that she betrayed me too. The money she claims I stole from her? Ask her about the art gallery scheme. Ask her why I really changed my will. Simone's face went white. The cafe door burst open and Jailer stormed in, fury radiating off her like heat. You backstabbing little snake! Jailer, don't, I started. No, she needs to hear this. Jailer slammed her hands on our table. Harrison's been playing you, Simone. That 20%, it's coming from a property he's already underwater on. I just got the financial records from Ishmael. Simone's composure cracked. What? The house is mortgaged to hell. He's been using it as collateral for failed investments. Your cut would be worth pennies, if anything. He wouldn't. Simone's voice trembled. He promised, like he promised to love and cherish your sister? Jailer pulled out a chair. Start talking. What was Luna's voicemail about? Tears smeared Simone's expensive mascara. I convinced some investors to put money into a fake art gallery, used Luna's name to make it seem legitimate. When she found out, she cut you out, I finished, and now you're helping Harrison do the same thing to me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was angry, jealous. He said all the right things. Save it. I stood up, gathering my things. You know what the difference is between you and me, Simone. I learned from Luna's lessons. You just proved why she taught them. Outside, Jailer grabbed my arm. What now? Now? I pulled out my phone and dialed Ishmael. Now we go nuclear. Harrison wants to play dirty. Fine. But he forgot one thing. What's that? I'm Luna Pearson's niece, and she taught me how to destroy men like him without ever raising my voice. As we walked away, I could see Simone through the cafe window, alone with her cold coffee and colder realizations. My phone buzzed with a text from Harrison. Your sister told me everything. You really think you can beat me at this game? I typed back, Game's just starting, Harrison. Hope you kept those receipts. Then I blocked his number and called my new lawyer. It was time to show Harrison exactly what kind of woman he'd underestimated. Oh, holy shit, Ishmael whispered, his eyes glued to his computer screen. This goes deeper than we thought. Jailer and I huddled around his desk as windows of financial data populated his monitors. The small office felt even more cramped with the tension building in the air. Talk to me, I said, gripping the back of his chair. Your husband's been busy. Ishmael pulled up a series of transactions. See these transfers? They're not just going to offshore accounts. He's been building a whole shadow operation through Lucy's shell company. How much are we talking about? Jailer asked. Including your renovation money? He clicked through several screens. Just over $2 million. There's a property in Belize, investment accounts in the Cayman Islands, and... He paused, frowning. Well, this is interesting. What? Lucy's company has been receiving regular consulting fees since before you even got married. Harrison's been paying her for years. The revelation hit like a punch to the gut. So their relationship predates everything, Jailer finished. That son of a bitch. Ishmael turned to face us. We need to move carefully. These kinds of financial schemes usually have fail-safes. One wrong move and he could liquidate everything. So what do? We prepare the perfect trap. He pulled out a legal pad. First, we file paperwork to freeze assets, but we do it quietly through the international courts where his money is hidden. Then we request forensic discovery and mediation. Won't he see that coming? Not if we time it right, Jailer grinned. The mediation request will look like a desperate move from a scorned wife. Meanwhile, the international courts will be closing in. My phone buzzed, an email from Harrison's assistant. My heart stopped when I saw the subject line, Property Sale Documents, Final Review. They're selling the house, I said, scanning the email. Closing date is next week, right before mediation. Perfect timing, Ishmael muttered. He's trying to convert the property to cash before proceedings start. Can we stop it? Better. Jailer pulled out her phone. We can use it. I know a reporter at the Business Journal who'd love to hear about a prominent developer's suspicious property dealings. No, I said, remembering Luna's words. Not yet. We need to be smarter than that. I turned to Ishmael. How long would it take to trace every renovation payment? I already have. He pulled up another screen, and I found something interesting. These reimbursement forms. the ones authorizing payments to Lucy's company. Your signature is on them." "That's impossible. I never signed anything for Lucy's company." "Exactly." He zoomed in on the digital signature. "This is a forgery. A good one, but definitely fake. The metadata proves it was created using software registered to Gibson Development." "Wire fraud," Jailer whispered. "That's federal." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling my lawyer. We need to file an injunction on the house sale immediately." "On what grounds?" "Financial interest in the renovations. The prenup proves I invested in good faith. That should buy us enough time." As I dialed, Ishmael and Jailer exchanged looks. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," Jailer said. "Just, you're different now. Calmer, more calculated. I learned from the best." I thought of Luna's journals, her careful documentation of every betrayal she'd ever faced. Harrison thinks he's playing chess, but he forgot to check who taught me the game. The call connected, and I outlined our strategy to my lawyer. By the time I hung up, Ishmael had compiled everything into a single encrypted file. "One more thing," he said, pulling up a final document. "I found this buried in the company records. Harrison took out a massive loan against the house 3 months ago. The money's gone, but the debt isn't." "Where did it go?" "That's the best part," he smiled. "It went to Lucy's company and then vanished. If I had to guess, he's planning to disappear after the sale closes." "Not anymore." I stood up, a strange calm settling over me. "File everything, start the freezes, but don't let him know we're coming." "What are you going to do?" Jailer asked. I thought about Harrison's smug face in mediation, imagining the moment he realized he'd lost everything. "I'm going to let him think he's winning, right up until the moment he falls." As we left Ishmael's office, my phone buzzed with another email. The house sale documents, marked urgent. Harrison's signature was already there, waiting for mine. I smiled, thinking of Luna's words. The best revenge isn't served hot or cold. It's served with paperwork and patience. "Soon," I whispered, declining the email. "Very soon." The injunction landed on Harrison's desk like a bomb. I knew because Lucy called me, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. "The buyers are waiting." "Tell Harrison if he wants to sell my investment, he needs my signature, for real this time, not the forged ones you've been using." Silence crackled over the line. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No, maybe the FBI will help refresh your memory." She hung up. 10 minutes later, Harrison called. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I was willing to be generous in mediation." "Generous?" I laughed. "Like you were generous with my inheritance?" "I built that house into something spectacular. All you did was write checks." "Funny you should mention checks." I glanced at Ishmael across my kitchen table, where he was tracking international account movements in real time. "How's the Belize property doing?" The sharp intake of breath on his end was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning this. "Who told you about?" "Does it matter? What matters is that in about—" I checked my watch. 30 minutes. Courts in 3 countries will receive evidence of your offshore accounts. Unless... Unless what? His composure was cracking. "Meet me at the house. 1 hour, come alone." I hung up before he could respond. Jailer, who'd been recording the call, stopped the recording. "You really think he'll come?" she asked. "He'll come. His ego won't let him ignore the challenge." The house looked different as I pulled into the driveway, smaller somehow. Harrison's car was already there, and he stood on the porch like he owned it, which technically he still did. For now. "Where's Lucy?" I asked, climbing the steps. "Where's your lawyer?" "Fair enough." I unlocked the door with my old key. "Shall we?" Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and broken promises. Harrison followed me to the kitchen. Our kitchen, where he'd served me divorce papers just months ago. "What do you want, Zariah?" To understand. I leaned against the counter. Was any of it real? Us? This house? Or was I just a convenient bank account? Something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or just annoyance at being questioned. Does it matter now? It matters to the SEC. They're very interested in how you've been moving money through Lucy's company. He stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled out my phone, showing him Ishmael's latest report. Your accounts in Belize are already frozen, Cayman Islands too. Lucy's company is being audited as we speak. You bitch, he whispered, but I heard the fear beneath the anger. Here's what's going to happen, I continued calmly. You're going to transfer the house back to me. Fair compensation for my stolen inheritance. In exchange, I won't send this evidence to the FBI. You expect me to believe you'd just let it go? No, I smiled, channeling Luna's steel. I expect you to realize it's your only option. My phone buzzed, a text from Jailer. FBI just got an anonymous tip about wire fraud. Oops. Oh, I said, showing him the message. Looks like someone beat me to it. Guess my offer expires now. The colour drained from his face. You can't prove anything. Those forged signatures say otherwise, not to mention the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the mysterious loans. I headed for the door. Better call your lawyer, Harrison. The good one, not Charlie. Wait, his voice cracked. What do you want? Really? I turned back, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the powerful man I'd married, but a cornered fraud desperately trying to save himself. I want you to remember something, I said quietly. Every time you look in the mirror, every time you see another woman with money in her eyes, remember this moment. Remember how it feels to lose everything because you underestimated the wrong woman. I left him standing in our perfect kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of his schemes. Outside, Jailer waited in her car. How'd it go? Give it an hour, I said, sliding into the passenger seat. His lawyer will call with surrender terms. And if he doesn't? My phone buzzed again, an email from Ishmael. More accounts found, more evidence gathered. The net was closing. Then we do this the hard way. I thought of Luna's words in her final letter. Sometimes the best revenge is letting karma do its work while you watch from the front row. Either way, I said, mediation should be interesting. Jailer started the car, grinning. Front row seats to karma, wouldn't miss it for the world. The mediation room felt like a theatre before a performance. Harrison sat across the table with Charlie, both wearing identical smug expressions. Lucy hovered by the door like an anxious understudy, her designer outfit failing to hide her nervousness. Let's begin, the mediator said, shuffling her papers. Mr. Gibson's team has prepared an initial offer. Charlie slid a document across the table. Ms. Pearson can keep her vehicle and personal effects. In exchange, she drops all claims to the property and signs an NDA. My lawyer, Patricia, didn't even touch the paper. Is this a joke? We believe it's more than fair, Harrison said, straightening his tie. Considering the circumstances. My hands trembled slightly under the table, not from fear, from anticipation. I caught Jailer's eye where she sat in the corner, taking notes. She gave me the tiniest nod. Actually, Patricia said, opening her briefcase, we have a counteroffer. Counteroffer? Charlie laughed. There's nothing to counter. The house is in my client's name. Patricia pulled out a thick folder. Let's talk about names, shall we? Specifically, the names on these offshore accounts. The colour drained from Harrison's face. We have documented evidence of systematic fraud, Patricia continued, laying out papers like playing cards. Wire transfers to shell companies, forged signatures, hidden assets. Charlie grabbed the documents, flipping through them frantically. These are confidential business records. How did you get them legally? Patricia smiled. Amazing what a forensic accountant can find in public records. Speaking of public, She slid a newspaper across the table. "This morning's business journal seems interested in your client's creative accounting." Harrison snatched the paper. There, in black and white, "Local developer under investigation for financial fraud." "You promised," he started. "I promised nothing," I cut in. "You taught me that promises are just words, remember?" Lucy stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove—" "Ms. Hart," Patricia interrupted, "or should I say sole proprietor of L. Hart Industries, I'd advise you to stop talking and call your own lawyer. The FBI is particularly interested in your role in this." The mediator cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess." "No need," I said, pulling out one final document. "The prenup Harrison claimed was destroyed. Aunt Luna kept a copy. Everything I invested in the house, it's protected. Everything he stole, it's documented." Charlie whispered urgently to Harrison, whose face had turned an interesting shade of grey. "Here's my offer," I continued. "Transfer the house to me. It's true owner by investment rights. Repay every dollar you stole. In exchange, I don't testify against you when the FBI comes calling." "You wouldn't," Harrison whispered. "Try me." The mediator reviewed the prenup carefully. "This appears legally binding, combined with the evidence of financial misconduct." "We need to consult," Charlie began. "No," Harrison cut him off. His empire was crumbling and he knew it. "What do I need to sign?" Patricia produced the transfer documents. As Harrison scrawled his signature, Lucy burst into tears and ran from the room. "One more thing," I said, standing up. "That NDA you wanted me to sign, here's my counteroffer." I dropped a USB drive on the table. Every email, every transfer, every forged document, it all goes public unless you disappear. Not just from my life, but from this city. Start fresh somewhere else, Harrison. Far away from me. He stared at the USB drive like it was a snake. "You've changed." "No." I gathered my things. "I just stopped letting you make me small." Outside the mediation room, Jayla hugged me tight. "That was beautiful, like watching a masterclass in karma." "It's not over," I warned. "The FBI investigation—" "Will handle itself," she finished. "You did your part. Let the system do the rest." My phone buzzed. A text from Ishmael. "Lucy's talking to the FBI. Harrison's accounts are frozen. It's done." Another message followed, this one from an unknown number. Aunt Luna would be proud. Simone. I deleted it without responding. "Want to see your house?" Jayla asked, dangling the keys she'd snagged from Patricia. "Not yet." I watched through the window as Harrison slumped in his chair, Charlie frantically making calls. First, I want to watch him realize what it feels like to lose everything. Revenge served cold? No. I thought of Luna's journals, her careful documentation of every betrayal and victory. Revenge served exactly right. The mediator emerged, looking slightly shell-shocked. "Miss Pearson, the papers are ready for final signatures." I took one last look at Harrison through the window. He'd taught me that love was a weakness to exploit. But Luna had taught me something better. Justice was a dish best served with receipts. "Coming," I said, straightening my spine. "Let's finish this." The empty house echoed with my footsteps as I walked through each room, running my fingers along the walls Harrison and I had picked colours for together. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through windows that had witnessed both love and betrayal. My phone buzzed. Another news alert about Harrison. The headlines kept coming. Developer faces federal charges. Executive assistant turns state's evidence. $1 million fraud scheme exposed. "You're not keeping all this furniture, right?" Jayla called from the living room. "It screams compensating divorcee." "Selling it," I replied. "Every piece he bought with stolen money is going to charity." "Speaking of money," she waved an envelope. "Ishmael's final report. They found 3 more accounts in Luxembourg. The FBI's having a field day." Good. I opened the master bedroom door, remembering the morning Harrison served me divorce papers. The room felt different now, cleaner somehow. A knock at the front door made us both jump. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I saw Simone standing on the porch, clutching what looked like old photo albums. "Don't answer it," Jayla warned. But I was already heading downstairs. Some conversations needed to happen face to face. "Before you slam the door," Simone said quickly, "I found these in Mom's attic. They're Luna's old photos. Her notes are still inside." I took the albums but didn't invite her in. "Why are you here, Simone?" "Because I was wrong." Her voice cracked. "About everything. The art gallery scheme. Luna didn't just cut me off. She tried to help me first. I found the letters where she offered to pay for business school to teach me legitimate investing." She wiped her eyes. "I was too proud, too angry, just like with you." "And Harrison? Turned out that 20% he promised me, it was tied to one of his frozen accounts. I got played too." She laughed bitterly. "Karma's a poet, isn't it?" Before I could respond, my phone rang, the FBI agent handling Harrison's case. "Ms. Pearson, we found something interesting in Mr. Gibson's private server. Emails discussing similar schemes with other women, dating back years. Would you be willing to help us contact them?" I looked at Simone, still standing in the doorway with smeared mascara and years of regret in her eyes. "Actually, I know someone who might be perfect for that." After connecting Simone with the FBI, her first step toward redemption, I returned to exploring the house. In the kitchen, I found Luna's old recipe book, still sitting where I'd left it the day Harrison ended everything. Inside, tucked between recipes for pound cake and pot roast, was one final letter I'd never noticed. "Dearest Soraya, if you're reading this, you've either found your strength or lost your way. Either way, remember, houses are just walls and windows. Home is what you build inside yourself. And revenge? It's not about destroying someone else. It's about refusing to let them destroy you. All my love, Luna." "Hey," Jayla called from upstairs. "Come see this." I found her in the home office, pointing at Harrison's pretentious motivational poster about success. "Look behind it," she said. There, hidden by the frame, was a small safe. Inside, documents proving Harrison had planned similar schemes with 3 other women before me. Each time, he'd gotten smarter. Each time, until me. "Should we add these to the FBI's collection?" Jayla asked. "No." I closed the safe. "They have enough. This is just confirmation that I broke the pattern." My phone buzzed one last time, a text from Lucy. "I'm sorry for everything. You were right about him." I didn't respond. Some lessons people needed to learn on their own. "So," Jayla said, looking around, "what now? Sell the house? Burn it down?" "Neither." I walked to the windows and opened them wide, letting fresh air sweep through the room. "I'm going to make it mine. Really mine this time." "Fresh paint? New furniture?" "New everything." I smiled, thinking of Luna's letter. "Except the bones of the place. Those are solid." We spent the rest of the day opening windows, letting light into every dark corner Harrison had tried to claim. Each room felt lighter, as if the house itself was shedding his influence. That evening, sitting on the floor of what would become my new home office, I opened Luna's photo albums. Between pictures of family holidays and summer vacations, she'd written little notes, life lessons, warnings, celebrations. On the last page, under a photo of me at my law school graduation, she'd written, "Some women get broken by betrayal. The best ones get built by it." I touched the words gently, finally understanding. This house, this revenge, this whole journey, it wasn't about Harrison at all. It was about becoming someone who could never be betrayed again. Not because I stopped trusting, but because I finally trusted myself.
I am Monica, 26 years old, and I work as a web designer, growing up in a small rural town with my grandparents, parents, and younger sister Linda. Life was far from fair. My sister, 7 years my junior, was the apple of everyone's eye. Her opinions were always prioritized, leaving me feeling neglected and unimportant. The favoritism was blatant. On Linda's birthdays, she received lavish gifts, while mine, close to Christmas, were combined into a single occasion, marked with practical gifts like books I had no interest in. When Linda started playing soccer, our parents were her biggest supporters, never missing a game or practice. In contrast, when I played my final tennis match in middle school, they were too busy driving Linda somewhere to attend. This pattern of disparity defined my childhood, fostering a growing sense of inadequacy and loneliness. Still, Linda wasn't blind to the injustice. She often stood up for me when our parents compared us harshly. "Monica is good at studying and teaching. She can do anything," she'd say. After my last tennis match, she even handed me a bouquet of flowers she had picked herself, whispering, "Good job." Our grandparents, too, tried to intervene on my behalf, reprimanding my parents for their behavior. But when my grandmother passed away, and soon after my grandfather, any buffer against my parents' criticism dissolved. Linda continued to support me for a while, but as my mother began targeting her with the same harshness, she eventually stopped. "If you're always going to side with your sister, you might as well stand outside too," my mother would sneer. To protect Linda, I told her to stop defending me. From then on, Linda focused on excelling in sports and academics, becoming the daughter my parents could proudly praise. Meanwhile, our parents' finances took a hit after the funerals, and they informed me there was no money for college. My dream of studying design at university was crushed. Instead, I graduated high school and took a job at a small design company far from home. There, I worked tirelessly, starting as an office assistant but seizing every opportunity to learn from the designers. My passion for web design kept me going, and I spent weekends studying online courses to build my skills. 3 years later, I was promoted to the design team, and 5 years after that, I became a full-fledged web designer, trusted with leading projects. During this time, I rarely returned home. Visiting only brought back the sting of my parents' disapproval, so I focused entirely on my career. 8 years after high school, I received unexpected news. Linda was preparing for university entrance exams, aiming for a prestigious medical school in the city. Despite everything, I felt proud of her. When she was accepted into her first-choice school, I congratulated her warmly. "Linda, congratulations, you've worked so hard, and I admire your dedication." She thanked me, her voice tinged with embarrassment, but soon revealed a concern. The school suggested a donation. "It's not mandatory, but Mom and Dad are worried about how it would look if we don't contribute. With tuition and living expenses already being so high, they don't know what to do." Linda planned to cover her living expenses with part-time work, but I could see the strain medical school would impose. My parents, unable to afford the donation, had pushed Linda to ask me instead of approaching me themselves. Their audacity left me stunned. Even though I resented their actions, I couldn't ignore Linda's predicament. I decided to support my sister, covering the donation and entrance fees so she could begin her new life at university. Linda moved into an apartment near the campus, and since it wasn't far from where I lived, I thought she could rely on me if she ever needed help. However, as she became immersed in college life, her responses to me grew increasingly curt. I'd get messages like, "I want to eat this," or, "I need this, please buy it for me," and I would arrange whatever she needed, supporting her in ways she couldn't ask of our parents. Occasionally, we'd meet for a meal, but even then, she remained distant, engrossed in her smartphone rather than engaging with me. When I tried to talk about her studies or lighten the mood, she'd brush me off, complaining that studying was hard. Her demeanor left me bewildered. At one such dinner, I tried to steer the conversation with a light-hearted comment. "Mom and Dad probably only care about you, though," I said, smiling, but Linda suddenly stared at me with an icy expression and snorted. "Of course, a medical student like me and a high school graduate designer like you are incomparable. No one cares about a job that doesn't even need qualifications like yours." Her words felt like a slap. "There's no need to say it like that," I replied, stunned. Linda rolled her eyes. "It's the truth. Being a designer is just a title. Anyone can make a website if they look it up online. You'd probably be better off getting a real qualification, but that's hard for someone who only graduated high school." I tried to defend myself. "It's not that simple. I'm studying and working hard every day. You shouldn't judge without understanding." Linda dismissed me with a displeased glance and clicked her tongue. Dad and Mom are right. They say you're a disappointment. Someone who couldn't even go to college. I'm only here because they told me to watch over you and make sure you don't fall any lower. I froze, her words sinking in like stones. Memories of my parents comparing us since childhood rushed back. Linda is smart, kind, and dependable, while Monica is stupid, clumsy, and can't do anything. I lowered my head, feeling like I couldn't breathe. Seeing me bow my head, Linda mistook my silence for tears and smirked. I'm going home now, she said briskly and left. Living on her own had transformed Linda. Surrounded by exceptional people and showered with praise from our parents, she fully believed in the image they painted of her as a prodigy destined to be a top doctor. Meanwhile, their disdain for me was reflected in her tone and attitude, as though she had absorbed their judgment entirely. That winter, as usual, I returned home for the holidays. My parents had asked me to come back with Linda, who hadn't visited since starting university. When we arrived, it was clear who the focus of their attention was. The table was piled high with steak, pizza, and treats to celebrate her visit. That evening, neighbors, relatives, and even Linda's old classmates gathered for a grand party. Linda basked in the attention, boasting loudly about her life at university. Mom keeps asking me to come home more often, but you know how tough it is at the country's most prestigious medical school. I can't just leave my team projects or relax at home. People are always contacting me about something, and it's exhausting. I busied myself in the kitchen, avoiding the spotlight, but I could hear her voice dominating the conversation. To the parents and relatives, her boasting seemed fine, but to the neighbors and classmates, it must have sounded grating. When I brought out a tray of wine, an elderly neighbor tried to shift the attention to me. Monica, aren't you working in design? Before I could respond, Linda and my parents cut in. You can't really say much about her. She's trying, but she didn't even go to college. She's such a disappointment, my mother said bluntly. The room fell awkwardly silent. Many of those present hadn't gone to college themselves and were raising families or working hard, but they refrained from contradicting her. Only my parents and Linda seemed oblivious to the discomfort. Feeling humiliated, I tried to slip away, but Linda stopped me. You still come home a lot, don't you, Monica? I guess you don't think about anything. Maybe that's why you're so bold, she said, laughing loudly. Our parents joined in, laughing as if it was all a joke. If you say that much, Linda, it'll hurt her feelings. Poor Monica, my father added mockingly. My anger boiled over. I clenched my fists and managed to squeeze out. It's better if I don't come back next year. I get it. Relatives and neighbors looked at me with concern, but I ignored them, putting down the tray and grabbing my coat and bag. Linda smirked as I prepared to leave. I understand. Don't bother coming back again, she said with a wave, and my parents echoed her sentiment with casual indifference. Heart pounding with anger and sorrow, I stepped out into the cold night, leaving behind the people who had so thoroughly dismissed me. I didn't look back. As I headed to the station, I fought to suppress the storm of emotion swirling within me. Returning home always left me with a heavy heart. When I was aspiring to be a web designer, I could use my studies as an excuse to distance myself from my parents. But as I grew older and advanced in my career, I found it harder to sever ties completely. The lingering sense of familial obligation weighed on me, even as I struggled to reconcile the disappointment and anger I felt toward them. Linda was still a university student, young and inexperienced in the realities of working life. Perhaps that's why she couldn't grasp how much effort it took to navigate society independently. I told myself that our parents had likely done their best in their own way to raise their children. Still, it was undeniable that they had spent years putting Linda on a pedestal, praising her as a genius while adopting a condescending attitude toward me. That winter, Linda's terrible behavior during our family gathering solidified my resolve. I realized that if I truly valued my own work and self-respect, I couldn't continue this toxic relationship, even with my own family. It was in that moment I decided to cut ties for good. Months passed after that decision. One day, I received an unexpected call from Linda. When I didn't answer, she persistently left messages, urging me to pick up. Reluctantly, I finally answered. Did you pay my tuition properly? Linda's voice carried a mixture of urgency and entitlement. I responded calmly. I paid the donation and the entrance fee before you enrolled. What about this year's tuition? The university is asking for it urgently, she replied. I don't know anything about that, I said. Even over the phone, I could sense Linda's discomfort. Indeed, I had drained my savings to cover her initial costs, the entrance fee, donation, and tuition for her first year. Those expenses had almost depleted my finances at the time. and I'd planned to pay subsequent fees as they came due. But after the incident at the end of the year, it was inconceivable that they would expect me to continue supporting Linda, especially after being told not to come home. I paid the donation because I wanted to support you, I said firmly. Didn't mom and dad send you to an out-of-state private university because they could afford the tuition? Or did they do it knowing they didn't have the money? That's not it, Linda stammered. I have wealthy friends, so there are other expenses besides tuition and living costs. Mom and dad somehow managed those, but now they don't have the money for tuition. That's why they told me to contact you. It all made sense. My parents had likely counted on my financial support from the start, especially after I advanced in my career. I had moved to a major design firm, where my skills were recognized, and my salary had increased significantly, while I had saved diligently. My support for Linda was meant to be temporary, not a permanent obligation. From the sound of it, the savings meant for her education had been squandered on her leisure activities. Despite this, I no longer had the emotional capacity to forgive. Helping with the tuition wouldn't have been financially difficult, but I refused. A few days later, my parents called, demanding I pay Linda's tuition. Their accusatory tone only deepened my resentment. It was clear that they didn't see me as part of the family, only as a source of money. Their lack of respect and consultation made it impossible for me to comply. Linda began calling almost daily. Her messages were filled with self-centered pleas. Please pay the tuition. If you don't, I'll be expelled. Scholarships and part-time jobs aren't enough. It would be a waste if someone as promising as me had to leave school. I'll pay you back when I start working. Just help me. As family. She even left absurd messages like, if you're upset because they told you not to come home, I can try persuading mom and dad. I saved her messages in a separate file, then deleted everything else and blocked her number. No one deserves to be treated as a doormat just because they're family. After that, I completely cut off communication with them. A relative later told me that Linda managed to secure scholarships and loans to cover her second year's tuition. However, without financial support for living expenses, she had to work part-time. Balancing work with her studies proved too difficult, and she ended up failing several courses. Eventually, she dropped out of university altogether. With no other options, Linda returned to live with our parents, but with their finances drained, there was no money to consider transferring her to another school. She didn't seek work locally either. Instead, she became reclusive, spending her days immersed in video games and lashing out at night in fits of stress. A friend who lived nearby later told me that the sounds of family arguments could be heard regularly from their house. My parents, once so proud of Linda, seemed powerless to confront her. As time went on, things only worsened. My father, under immense stress, caused a scandal while commuting to work. He was accused of groping a woman on the train, and though the case was settled without charges, he resigned in shame. My mother, who had little work experience, struggled to find a job that could sustain the family. They occasionally tried to contact me through relatives, but their messages were always the same, demanding and unapologetic. Eventually, even the relatives lost patience. We'll handle it here, don't worry, they told me, cutting off any further attempts at communication. I heard through the grapevine that Linda and my father, both unemployed, were living in near destitution. My mother, frustrated and overwhelmed, had disappeared entirely, leaving them to fend for themselves. Without any goodwill left in the neighborhood, help from others was non-existent. Meanwhile, my life had taken a different path. My career as a designer flourished. I was invited to join a major project that would leave my name known in the industry. With the project wrapping up and my savings secure, I decided to pursue a long-held dream, taking university entrance exams. Now, I plan to study business management, with the goal of going independent in the future. For the first time in years, my heart is racing with excitement for the challenges ahead. You don't have a room here, so you can sleep in the lobby like a stray dog. With a loud thud, my husband's suitcase was dropped at my feet. The cold spring wind bit into my skin, but it couldn't match the sting of rejection. Just a week ago, when Mark had suggested this family trip, my heart had soared with hope. I thought it might finally be the moment he'd begin to accept me as part of the family. I poured all my love into preparing for the trip, eager to be acknowledged. But now, standing alone in the hotel lobby, I understood everything too well. A sharp shove from behind jolted me, slamming my shoulder into a cold marble column. "Oh, Anna, you were just standing there in the way," my sister-in-law, Heather, remarked with a cruel smile, her eyes sparkling with amusement. You should curl up in the corner like a stray. Clutching my suitcase, I watched as Mark carefully carried Heather's bags upstairs, his expression one of casual disinterest as he avoided my gaze. Move to the far corner of the lobby. Your presence brings down our family's dignity, he said coldly, walking off with his sister, shoulder to shoulder, as they made their way to the third floor. Behind me, my mother-in-law's laughter cut through the lobby like a jagged blade. Better than being outside in the cold, isn't it? Compared to being homeless, the lobby's a luxury, she sneered. They had booked 3 rooms, deliberately excluding me, again. For years, I had swallowed their cruelty, desperately trying to preserve the family bond one craved. Losing my father as a child had left me yearning for new ties, for a sense of belonging. I endured everything, convincing myself that if I tried harder, if I were a better wife, they might finally value me. But tonight, standing under the chandelier's harsh light, the ache in my shoulder was nothing compared to the turmoil churning inside me. My fingers gripped my phone tightly as I felt something deep within me break apart. With trembling resolve, I took a deep breath and began to dial. My name is Anna James. I'm 35 years old and a full-time housewife. I married Mark 3 years ago, thrilled at the idea of gaining a new family. Having grown up with just my mother after my father passed, I treasured the concept of family above all else. Before we married, I had built up $5 million in assets through careful stock investments. I never believed financial matters needed to be shared between spouses, but 1 year into our marriage, Mark came home late one night, reeking of alcohol, with tears in his eyes. He confessed to being buried in gambling debt. He begged for my help, saying he couldn't handle it on his salary alone. Moved by his plea, I decided to trust him. The very next day, I told him about my savings. That decision changed everything. Mark's demeanor shifted overnight. He began boasting to his family about my financial success as though it were his own achievement. I hoped this shared confidence might bring us closer, but instead, it became the foundation of his growing entitlement. Anna, I'm a bit short this month, he'd say, month after month, his paycheck spent on luxuries for himself. If I hesitated, he'd guilt me. Oh, I get it. A poor guy like me doesn't deserve nice things. I'd sigh, open my wallet, and remind myself that marriage was about partnership, but his requests only grew bolder. Mark spent the money carelessly, expensive golf gear, lavish dinners, designer clothes, while brushing off my concerns with smug jokes. I have such a generous wife, aren't I lucky? Heather and my mother-in-law took advantage of my generosity too, treating my savings like a shared family resource. Heather's thinly veiled sarcasm grated on me. Mark is so lucky to have such a wealthy wife. She resented my financial independence, and her bitterness often spilled out in cutting remarks. Embroidery? Isn't that such a grandma hobby? She mocked when she saw the cherry blossom piece I had embroidered with my late mother. The craft was a cherished connection to my mom, but her words stung nonetheless. Over time, their relentless scorn and reliance on me drained me. I supported Heather's rent and living expenses, covered for Mark's irresponsibility, and endured their barbs, hoping that one day, they might see my value. But now, as I stood in that hotel lobby, the weight of their cruelty finally broke something inside me. Under the cold, indifferent gaze of my husband and his family, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. It was time to reclaim my life. I had listened to Heather's complaints and supported Gemma financially, all with the hope of strengthening our family bonds. At first, Mark respected my success, Gemma was considerate, and Heather treated me like a sister. But over time, everything shifted. Mark's demands grew, Gemma's dependency deepened, and Heather's bitterness sharpened. Still, I held on, telling myself they would eventually understand and accept me. Thank you, Anna. I'll make sure to pay this month's rent by tomorrow, Gemma would say every month, her words a hollow promise. Her account was never touched, so I'd deposit $1,200 directly to her landlord to keep her from losing her home. Mom, are you sure you've handled the rent? Mark would ask her occasionally. Oh, I'm managing just fine, she'd reply with a smile, pretending she was independent. It hollowed me out, knowing she relied on me while pretending otherwise. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to tell Mark the truth. Each month, as Mark grew more oblivious to my sacrifices, I began seeing through his dependence, his mother's cunning, and Heather's malice. Embroidery became my refuge, my escape into a peaceful world where I felt close to my late mother. Each stitch was a quiet conversation with her spirit. But even this sacred part of my life wasn't safe from intrusion. Anna, why don't we have tea together? Let's spend time as a family, Gemma would suggest. If I declined, her friendly facade would vanish. How dare you act this way? Aren't we family? Heather would join in with her sharp tongue. Isn't family important to you, Anna? Even Mark took their side. Why can't you just get along with my mom and sister? He'd say dismissively. Slowly, the joy embroidery once brought me faded. Each prick of the needle began to feel like a stab of guilt and judgment. My home, which should have been my sanctuary, had become suffocating, yet I couldn't let go of the one thing that connected me to my mother. Anna, I want to get new golf clubs, Mark said one day, his tone insistent as always. When I declined, he leaned into his well-worn tactic of guilt. You know where I come from, don't I deserve nice things for once? Then there was Gemma's predictable monthly plea. I could really use help with rent again. I no longer hesitated. I silently transferred the payment to her landlord. But when I saw Gemma proudly showing off a new designer handbag, the truth became painfully clear. Mom's got the good stuff, Mark said, grinning. It struck me then, my sacrifices weren't appreciated, they were wasted. And still, Mark's sense of entitlement knew no bounds. Anna, you should treat me too, he joked. I began questioning why I continued to enable this behavior, trapped by a false sense of duty. Then, one day, Mark surprised me. Hey, Anna, let's do something special for your birthday this year, just the two of us, how about a trip? I looked up, startled. In 3 years of marriage, we had never celebrated my birthday together. He always claimed he couldn't afford it, telling me to treat myself with my own money. This time, he seemed genuinely enthusiastic. I'll plan everything. It's your birthday, after all, he said, scrolling through hotels and sightseeing spots. When he showed me a picture of a luxury hotel with grand chandeliers and an elegant lobby, my heart lifted, just a little. As the trip date approached, Mark grew restless, glued to his phone, texting and occasionally smiling to himself. Is everything okay, Mark? I asked. Oh, yeah, nothing, just stuff, he replied vaguely. 3 days before the trip, he came home early, his tone oddly serious. There's something I wanted to talk about. My heart sank slightly. So, my mom found a restaurant nearby she really wants to try. I thought it'd be nice to invite her along, he said, almost casually. Why? I whispered, feeling an uneasy weight settle in my chest. Come on, Anna, she'd love it. It'll be family time, right? Family time. In Mark's world, family always meant his mother, his sister, and maybe me. Oh, and my sister will be coming too, he added, hesitating as though he knew how wrong it sounded. His explanation felt rehearsed. My birthday trip had somehow morphed into a family affair. My sister's husband and she had a big argument, so she could use the break. You know, he added, his tone sympathetic. This was supposed to be my birthday, I said softly, my voice trembling. What's the problem? It's just family. His voice sharpened, shifting blame onto me. So what, Anna? Are you really that against having them with us? I swallowed my response. Somehow, his challenge felt like another game he'd already won. On the morning of the trip, Gemma and Heather stood at the station, waiting as though they'd been part of the plan all along. Anna, we're all set to go, right? Heather's voice was laced with sweet mockery. Isn't this perfect? A family trip on your birthday, she added, her sarcasm dripping with satisfaction. I stood silently on the platform, my last flicker of hope extinguished. 3 years of marriage, so many sacrifices, and for what? A hollow sense of belonging to a family that never truly wanted me. I closed my eyes, feeling a faint breeze touch my cheek. Oh Mark, I'd love one of those nice lunches, his mother said, her voice piercing and intentionally loud. She looped her arm through his, looking right past me as if I were invisible. Sure, Mom. Anna, can you pay for it? Mark held out his hand without so much as a glance in my direction, his attention focused entirely on his mother and sister. Resigned, I handed over my wallet, feeling the familiar weight of his disregard. I'll have the shrimp stir-fry, make it just like Mark's order, it's what he loves after all, his mother said with a smug glance in my direction. Same for me, nothing like family all enjoying the same thing, huh? Gemma chimed in. The three of them exchanged smiles, leaving me an outsider on what was supposed to be my special day. On the train, Mark sat between his mother and sister while I was relegated to a seat across the aisle. So Mark, last night was awful. My husband, well, you know how he is, Gemma began, her dramatic complaints filling the train car and drawing glances from nearby passengers. I sat quietly, weighed down by their voices and the pointed reminders of all the things I supposedly didn't understand. And Anna, without kids or a career, you wouldn't understand what I go through, Gemma added, her tone dripping with condescension. True, Anna's got it easy, doesn't she? Heather laughed. Mark chuckled lightly, as if it were all harmless banter. They kept going, their jabs at me interspersed with barbs at each other, while Mark passively played along. By the time we reached the hotel, any illusion of a warm birthday celebration had been thoroughly shattered. In the lobby, I waited quietly as they checked in. Hello, Mr. James, your reservation includes 2 rooms, the desk clerk informed him. Mark turned to me with a smug smile. Oh, Anna, I only booked 2 rooms. Mom and I will share one, and my sister has her own. Where am I supposed to stay? I asked, incredulous. There's enough room for you, but hey, the lobby has some comfy couches. Lucky you, right? Gemma and Heather laughed openly, their satisfaction blatant. Look on the bright side, Anna, better here than outside in the cold like some stray dog, Heather added, her voice dripping with mockery. Mark grabbed my wallet again, extracting a few bills. Don't worry, Anna, we'll grab some drinks in your honor, he said as he walked off with his mother and sister, leaving me standing alone in the lobby. As they disappeared, I gazed up at the chandelier overhead, feeling a strange calm settle over me. It was a turning point. I took out my phone and whispered, "What a shame," before feigning a predicament. "Is there anything we can help you with, ma'am?" the front desk staff asked politely. Actually, yes, I spoke to the owner in advance, and he assured me I'd be well accommodated, I replied with quiet confidence. The staff's demeanor changed instantly. Recognizing the owner's name, they scrambled to assist me. Moments later, I was upgraded to the presidential suite, treated to a private dinner, and pampered like the only guest that mattered. By the time Mark and his family realized where I was already enjoying a gourmet meal in peaceful luxury. Mark's panicked texts went unanswered, his growing frustration adding to my quiet triumph. For once, I savored my birthday without their scrutiny, knowing this marked the beginning of my freedom. The next morning, I left the hotel as quietly as I had arrived, settling the bill on Mark's credit card. It was time to reclaim my life, leaving them to face the consequences of their own pettiness. Later that morning, back at the hotel, Mark and his family were in a frenzy. "This has to be a mistake," Mark exclaimed, pale-faced, as the front desk calmly explained the charges. The realization dawned on him, his card was maxed out. What kind of woman would do this to her husband? She's shameless, Heather shrieked. The hotel staff, maintaining their professionalism, informed them they'd be allowed to settle the bill later, a courtesy, thanks to my connections. But they had no idea how this would impact their social standing. When I returned home, the house was silent, and for the first time, I felt peaceful. I opened the curtains, letting in the fresh spring sunlight, and took a deep breath of relief. An hour later, the front door slammed open. "Anna, what the hell were you thinking?" Mark's furious voice was accompanied by his mother's shrill anger and Gemma's snide remarks. They berated me, raising their voices as if to humiliate me into submission, but I simply watched them, my expression calm and unreadable. "Why don't we continue this discussion outside?" I suggested coolly. They paused, caught off guard. "After all, you wouldn't want the neighbors to hear what's been going on, would you?" I walked them out and, with quiet resolve, confronted everything they had hidden. "By the way, here's the truth about the support I've given your mother all these years." Mark's face twisted as I revealed how I'd quietly covered his mother's rent for 3 years. "Starting this month, that arrangement is over," I said firmly. His mother's arrogance melted into desperation. "But Anna, please, you can't just stop like this." "I can, and I already have." I informed Gemma that her petty social media posts about me were well documented and shared with her husband, who was already filing for divorce. One by one, they understood the weight of their choices. They had bonded over their disdain for me, but now, unable to face one another, they were truly alone. A few weeks later, Mark came by to collect his belongings. "Can't we start over?" he asked, his voice full of desperation. "You spent years treating me like a monster wife, didn't you? Well, I hope you enjoyed it," I said calmly. "There's no need for me to act like the villain anymore. This is the end." Days later, a package arrived. Inside was one of my cherished embroidery pieces, carefully wrapped, with a note of apology from Mark's niece. It was a small but powerful reminder that kindness and understanding don't come from force, they come from genuine connection. Soon after, I began teaching embroidery classes, pouring myself into the craft my mother had taught me. Each stitch deepened my sense of peace. I had finally built my own circle of support and joy, not through obligation, but through love and authenticity, just as my mother would have wanted. Life was not extraordinary, but it was ours. My husband, James, and I had been married for 8 years. We had a modest home, a small but steady savings account, and a routine that felt comforting. James worked as a mid-level manager in a growing tech company, and I handled freelance design work from home while taking care of our 6-year-old daughter, Emma. James often talked about his dream of becoming a director at his company, a goal he pursued with relentless ambition. I supported him wholeheartedly. Late nights at the office? I made sure dinner was ready when he returned. Weekend networking events? I juggled Emma's schedule so he could attend. James was the provider, the head of the family, or so I thought. One evening, James came home earlier than usual, an excited glint in his eye. "Big things are happening, honey," he said, kissing my forehead. "This might finally be our break." I smiled at him, feeling his enthusiasm radiate through the room. "Our break?" I teased. He nodded. "Yeah, our break. Once this next step goes through, we'll be set for life." Though he didn't share many details, I assumed it was another career opportunity. I had no reason to doubt him. James was a man who worked hard for everything he had. I trusted him completely. The first sign of trouble came a few weeks later. James started receiving strange phone calls late at night. He'd step outside to answer them, his voice low and tense. When I asked, he brushed it off as work stress and assured me that everything was fine. Soon after, I noticed other changes. James became irritable, snapping over minor things like misplaced keys or a delayed dinner. Our once happy home grew quieter, the tension so thick it felt like walking on eggshells. One afternoon, Emma brought me the mail, her tiny hands clutching a thick envelope. "Mommy, this looks important," she said, her big blue eyes watching as I opened it. It was a letter from the bank, addressed to me. The words blurred together in a haze of disbelief as I read the contents. Loan confirmation, $1 million approved under the name of Claire Wilson. My heart pounded. I'd never applied for such a loan. Why would I? We didn't need $1 million, and even if we did, I certainly wouldn't take it out without a discussion. I stormed into the living room, clutching the letter. "James," I called, my voice shaking. He appeared in the doorway, his face pale as he saw the paper in my hand. "What's this?" I demanded. He hesitated, then sighed heavily. It's for us, Claire, for the future." I had to take the loan to invest in something big. Without telling me? I shot back, anger bubbling to the surface. "You put my name on this without even asking?" James looked away, avoiding my gaze. "It's complicated. Trust me, it'll pay off. You won't have to worry about a thing." But I couldn't shake the unease. Something about his explanation didn't add up. The way he avoided eye contact, the evasiveness in his tone, it wasn't like him. In the days that followed, the weight of that loan pressed down on me like a storm cloud. I tried to dig deeper, asking James more questions, but his answers grew curt and dismissive. Then, one evening, I overheard a conversation that shattered my world. James was in his office, talking on the phone. I paused outside the door, the sound of his voice sharp and agitated. "No, I told you, she doesn't know the whole story yet," he hissed. I had to use her name. My credit wouldn't have been enough. "Just give me more time." My stomach churned. James had lied to me about everything. Not only had he taken out a massive loan without my knowledge, but he'd also done it because his own finances were in shambles. He was using me as his scapegoat. That night, I confronted him. "I heard you," I said, standing in the kitchen while he poured himself a drink. He froze, his hand tightening around the glass. "Heard what?" "The phone call. You lied to me, James. You're in debt, aren't you? That loan wasn't for us. It was to cover your mistakes." James turned to face me, his expression hardening. "Claire, you don't understand how business works. I had no choice." "You had a choice," I snapped. "You could have told me the truth instead of dragging me into your mess." His response was chilling. "Don't make this a bigger deal than it needs to be," he said coldly. "You'll thank me when everything works out." But I couldn't just brush it aside. That night, as I lay awake, I realized the man I thought I knew, the man I trusted, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. In the days after confronting James, the air between us grew colder. Every glance, every word, was laced with tension. My trust in him, once unshakable, now felt like a fragile thread ready to snap. But I didn't have the luxury to dwell on emotions. I had to act. The loan was in my name, and if James's so-called plan fell apart, I'd be the one left to deal with the fallout. One morning, while James was at work, I decided to investigate. I sifted through his desk drawers and filing cabinets, looking for any clue about what he'd gotten us into. At first, all I found were old bills and office supplies. Then, Tucked away in the back of a drawer, I discovered a folder marked private. Inside were documents that made my heart sink. Bank statements showed staggering withdrawals from our savings, money I'd assumed was still there. Worse, there were contracts for what appeared to be a risky business investment. The terms were clear: if the venture failed, the entire debt would fall on me. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. James hadn't just lied, he'd gambled with our future. That evening, I waited for James to come home, the folder sitting on the coffee table like a bomb waiting to explode. When he walked through the door, his face hardened the moment he saw it. "What's this, James?" I demanded, my voice steady but laced with anger. "When were you planning to tell me you emptied our savings and tied me to your failed business scheme?" He rubbed his temples, his frustration evident. "Claire, I told you, I'm fixing everything. You don't understand how these things work." "Don't patronize me," I snapped, my voice breaking. "You put us at risk, James. You put Emma at risk. How could you do this to your family?" His expression shifted to something colder, almost dismissive. "I didn't think you'd get it," he said, turning away. "You're always so focused on playing it safe." The word stung. Was that how he saw me? As some obstacle to his ambitions? Over the next few weeks, things only got worse. James spent more and more time away from home, claiming he was handling the situation, but I wasn't convinced. His evasiveness, his growing distance, it felt like he was slipping away entirely. One evening, I overheard another phone call. This time, James wasn't hiding his tone of desperation. "I don't care what it takes," he said, his voice cracking. "I need more time, just don't let it get back to her." Who was he talking to, and what was he so afraid I'd find out? The breaking point came when a stranger showed up at our door. He was a sharply dressed man, carrying a briefcase and wearing an expression that was all business. "Mrs. Wilson?" he asked. "Yes? I'm here on behalf of Mr. Thompson. He's concerned about the delays in your loan payments and wanted to ensure you were aware of the terms." The blood drained from my face. "What delays?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man frowned, flipping through his papers. "Your payments are already 2 months overdue. If they're not resolved soon, the matter will escalate to legal proceedings." I stood there, stunned. James hadn't just lied, he'd been defaulting on the loan while pretending everything was under control. That night, when James finally came home, I was waiting for him, the weight of the stranger's words pressing down on me like a vice. "Who's Mr. Thompson?" I asked, my tone icy. James froze, his face pale. "Why are you asking about him?" "Because his representative came by today. Apparently, my loan is overdue. Care to explain?" He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "Claire, I didn't want to worry you. I'm working on it." "Stop lying," I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. "You've been lying to me for months, James. I don't even know who you are anymore." For the first time, he looked genuinely defeated. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I thought I could fix it before you found out." But his confession did little to ease the storm inside me. James had betrayed my trust, jeopardized our future, and dragged me into a mess I hadn't asked for. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't rely on James to fix this. If I wanted to protect Emma and myself, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. Little did I know, my decision would set off a chain of events that would change everything. The morning after my confrontation with James, I woke up with a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't going to sit around and let this disaster spiral further out of control. Emma and I deserved better. If James couldn't or wouldn't fix things, I would. I started by calling the loan officer. "Mr. Thompson, I needed answers, and I wasn't going to rely on James's evasions anymore." "Mrs. Wilson," Mr. Thompson said when I reached him. "It's unusual for us to hear directly from clients in this situation. Your husband has been the one managing the account." "Well, I'm managing it now," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you send me the full details of the loan agreement and any outstanding payments?" He hesitated for a moment. "Of course, but I must warn you, some of the terms your husband agreed to are quite steep." When the documents arrived later that day, I could hardly believe what I was reading. The interest rate alone was astronomical, and the penalties for defaulting were even worse. James had effectively tied us to a financial noose. I spent the next few days combing through every piece of paperwork, trying to find a way out. At the same time, I started researching local legal aid and financial advisors. I was determined to find someone who could help me untangle this mess. That's when I came across the name of a lawyer who specialized in cases like mine. Her name was Margaret Hayes. And she had a reputation for being relentless in protecting her clients. I made an appointment and walked into her office, with all my documents in hand. Margaret was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her early 40s, with an air of confidence that immediately put me at ease. "Let me get this straight," she said after reviewing the papers. "Your husband took out this loan in your name without fully disclosing the terms to you?" "Yes," I said, feeling a mix of anger and shame. I didn't know what I was signing. "He said it was for us, our family." She nodded thoughtfully. "It's not uncommon for people to trust their spouses implicitly. But this is serious. The terms are predatory, and if we can prove you were misled, there may be a way to challenge this legally." Her words were a lifeline, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of hope. While Margaret worked on the legal front, I threw myself into finding a way to bring in extra income. I had left my job years ago to focus on raising Emma, but now, desperate times called for desperate measures. I started applying to every job I could find, from administrative positions to part-time retail work. Rejection after rejection came in, each one a blow to my already fragile confidence. One day, after yet another fruitless job hunt, I sat on a park bench with Emma. She played on the swings, blissfully unaware of the storm raging around us. Watching her laugh and squeal as she soared higher, I felt a pang of guilt. She deserved stability, happiness, things I wasn't sure I could give her anymore. That's when I noticed a familiar face across the park. It was Sarah, an old friend I hadn't seen in years. We'd drifted apart after high school, but back then, she'd always been the one to dream big. "Claire," she said, approaching with a look of surprise, "is that you?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "It's been a long time, Sarah." We spent the next hour catching up. When I told her about my struggles, she listened intently. "You know," she said, "I just started working at a new company. They're always looking for reliable people, and I could put in a good word for you." It felt like fate. Sarah gave me the details, and by the end of the week, I had an interview lined up. The job wasn't glamorous, it was an entry-level administrative role, but it was something. The office was bustling, and the pace was demanding, but I threw myself into the work with everything I had. One day, as I was sorting through a stack of paperwork, I overheard two senior managers talking about a major upcoming project. They were brainstorming ideas, but seemed stuck. "Excuse me," I said, hesitantly interrupting. "I couldn't help but overhear. Maybe you could try this approach?" They looked at me with surprise, but one of them nodded. "That's actually a great idea," he said. From that day on, they began to notice me. Slowly but surely, I started earning their trust and respect. Meanwhile, Margaret called with good news. "We filed a formal complaint about the loan," she said. "If this goes to court, there's a strong chance we can argue that the agreement was predatory. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was progress." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over my life again. But just as things were starting to look up, James threw another curveball. One evening, he came home with an announcement that left me speechless. "I've decided to sell the house," he said casually, as if it were no big deal. "What?" I said, my voice rising. "You can't just decide that on your own, James. This is our home. It's not up for debate," he said coldly. "We need the money, and this is the only way." His words felt like a slap in the face. Selling the house meant uprooting Emma, destroying the one stable thing she had left. That night, as I sat in the empty living room, I realized that James wasn't going to stop. If I wanted to protect Emma and myself, I'd have to find a way to stand up to him once and for all. Out in the mountains, far from anyone, my mother-in-law glared at me. "Take care now," she said coldly before slamming the door of her fancy SUV. The sound echoed in the quiet night as gravel flew from the spinning tires. She drove off quickly, leaving me alone. Under the moonlight, I caught a glimpse of her face. For the first time, I saw her cruel smile and the glint of her eyes, sharp and dangerous like a predator. She looked at me like she'd already won. "Mom, why?" I whispered, my voice shaking, but she just leaned out the window and laughed. It was a chilling sound, full of triumph. "Goodbye, Emily," she sneered. "No one's coming to help you. By tomorrow, you'll just be food for the wolves." Her words cut through me like ice. The roar of her SUV's engine faded as the headlights disappeared into the dark, leaving me frozen in disbelief. I reached for my phone, desperate to call for help, but it wouldn't turn on. Then I remembered, earlier, she had borrowed my charger. She had planned all this. She tricked me into coming out here under the pretense of showing me a stargazing spot. I felt so foolish. Maybe if I had tried harder to get along with her, or if I had been more serious about handling things with my husband, this wouldn't have happened. But now, standing in the freezing night, I was alone, with only the distant howls of animals echoing in the distance. Fear crept through me. I could feel something watching from the shadows between the trees. The crunch of leaves and heavy footsteps came closer. My heart pounded as I backed away, unsure which direction was safe. Behind me, the sound of footsteps grew louder. I'm Emily Matthews, 26 years old, married to John for 2 years. John has always been kind and supportive. When I was overwhelmed with work or unwell, he would cook for me or help me feel better. Marrying him was the best decision of my life. I come from a well-off family, but I worked hard to build a life of my own. I didn't want to rely on my parents' money, so I kept my family's wealth a secret from John. I wanted to live by my own efforts. John and I both worked in the bridal industry, and I loved my job, but then John decided to quit his stable job to start his own business. Though worried, I supported him because I believed in his determination. Then, I found out the truth. John had been in a relationship with another woman from his college days. Not only that, but he had racked up $50,000 in debt from extravagant trips with her. I had no idea and was devastated when I learned about it. To my horror, he started his business with that same woman as his partner. He claimed his family was supporting him financially. His mother, Susan, adored him and justified everything he did. She treated me as if I was trying to steal her son. Meanwhile, John's sister, Megan, lived off him completely. She refused to work, saying she didn't want to deal with things like speaking formally to her boss. She seemed entitled and difficult, which made dealing with her exhausting. For a while, I endured it all because I loved John, but Susan and Megan started visiting our home often, rummaging through my belongings without permission. They used my expensive, cherished items as props for their social media, treating them carelessly. One day, Susan took my favorite brown purse without asking and broke it. I hoped she'd apologize, but instead, she smirked and said, "It was bought with John's money, so I don't owe you anything." I felt crushed. Even though I earned a good income, I couldn't keep replacing my things endlessly. I reminded Susan that the bag she broke was something I bought before I got married. It was my first big purchase, something I had dreamed of owning. "Yeah, right," she scoffed. "Girls like you don't have money for things like that. Don't try to fool me." She had already labeled me as a gold digger, accusing me of spending John's money on luxuries. It was impossible to talk to her. She didn't even try to understand. She only saw me as an enemy. When I turned to John for support, he barely listened. "Just hold on a little longer. Mom's going through a rough time," he said. It hurt so much to feel ignored, even by him. I had always thought of myself as strong and independent, but being so alone was overwhelming. Around that time, John's business started to fail. He couldn't keep up with Susan and Megan's expensive lifestyles anymore. He finally told them he couldn't support them financially. They panicked, but instead of considering getting jobs, they came up with another plan. "Take some of Emily's money and give it to us. Family comes first," Susan declared. I explained, again, that I split living expenses with John and used my own income, but they didn't believe me. Their frustration grew, and for a while, they visited less often. I thought maybe they were starting to accept reality. I was wrong. They were plotting something far worse. When Susan found out about my wealthy family, her resentment deepened. She became obsessed, convinced that if I disappeared, they could control John's money and even inherit a fortune from me. She imagined millions, even though I hadn't written a will, and my family, not them, would inherit everything. Her twisted thinking led her to a horrifying plan. Susan knew I loved photography, especially taking pictures of the night sky. She researched remote locations with little human activity and found a spot where she thought no one would find me. "Out here, no one will ever find you. It's bear season, this'll look like an accident," she told Megan. Megan agreed without hesitation. "I'll drive for you, Mom. We're doing this for John," she said, pretending it was for his sake, though it was really all for their own benefit. On the day of the plan, Susan called me with an unusually friendly tone. "Emily, I know you love stargazing. There's a spot nearby with the most beautiful stars. Want to go?" she asked. Feeling hesitant but hopeful, I agreed. They seemed so kind that day, chatting about beauty and fashion, even complimenting my hair. "I've always wanted a daughter like you," Susan said warmly. It felt strange, but I wanted to believe they were finally accepting me. When we reached the spot, they encouraged me to step out and take pictures. We'll grab some things from the car and join you, they said. I stepped out, looking up at the breathtaking stars, but then I heard the car door slam. I turned to see them locking the doors and starting the engine. We'll be taking the house and car, watch out for bears, honey, Susan shouted as they sped off, leaving me alone in the cold, dark mountains. Fear gripped me as I realized I had been abandoned, but I wasn't entirely unprepared. I had a backup plan. Meanwhile, Susan and Megan were celebrating. It's all taken care of, Susan said, grinning. They went out for a fancy dinner, thinking their troubles were over. But when they returned home, their celebration ended in shock. Police cars were waiting in the driveway. Standing beside them was me, calm and unharmed, alongside my father and several officers. What? How are you here? Susan stammered, frozen in disbelief. Megan tried to sneak away, but the police stopped her. I had been rescued thanks to my father's safety measures. Since I was young, he had insisted on tracking my location through GPS and having a backup emergency system. When I realized something was wrong, I activated it. My father, who had access to a private jet, reached me quickly. The clear stargazing spot made it easy for them to land and rescue me. I had also recorded the entire car ride, as my father had advised me to always record suspicious situations. We'll be taking the house and car, watch out for bears. Susan's voice rang out clearly from my phone. The evidence was undeniable. Susan and Megan were arrested on the spot for attempted murder and fraud. Susan fainted, and Megan broke down in hysterics, blaming her mother. John, meanwhile, was exposed for being with his mistress all along. He testified against his family, but it was just another betrayal in a series of heartbreaks. The story became a media sensation. Headlines mocked Susan as the mother-in-law who wanted millions. Details about how Susan and Megan used my belongings for social media clout went viral. John, who had once prided himself on his reputation, now couldn't even leave the house without facing shame. As for Susan and Megan, their disgrace didn't end with their arrests. Someone leaked their phone numbers, and they were bombarded with calls from angry strangers. The next day, all of Susan and Megan's bank accounts were frozen, and everything they owned was seized. Without John's income, they couldn't afford anything. To make matters worse, news about John's mistress spread all over the internet, destroying his reputation completely. The man who had betrayed me had now lost everything, including his dignity. I found out John had been with his mistress since the beginning of our marriage. Remembering the kind things he once did for me now felt like a cruel joke. Why had he married me if he never truly loved me? My heart ached with pain and betrayal, but I resolved to move on. Susan and Megan were evicted from their luxurious apartment and moved into public housing. It didn't take long before their new location was leaked online. Susan became mentally unstable, constantly muttering about how her life was over. Megan, abandoned by her own family, tried to work part-time jobs, but struggled due to a lack of skills and work ethic. Megan even messaged me, asking for help getting a job like mine. Working at weddings and wearing nice clothes sounds fun, she said. I ignored her. The bridal industry wasn't something she could just jump into, and their downfall wasn't my responsibility. Meanwhile, Susan moved into a rundown apartment surrounded by graffiti and decay. As for me, I left the house I'd once shared with John, along with all my possessions, and returned to my parents' home. It felt safer, even though I still carried emotional scars. One day, John unexpectedly called me. Seeing his name on the screen made my stomach churn. Emily, I'm so sorry. I've cut ties with my mom. Please, let's try again, he said, but his promises felt hollow. How could I trust him again after everything? Maybe your mistress needs your protection more than I do, I replied coldly, ending the call. Susan wasn't done yet. Desperate and bitter, she hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. When the detective found nothing, Susan latched onto a small detail, my PTSD. She thought she could use it against me. One evening, as I walked alone, Susan suddenly appeared on the sidewalk. Her clothes were shabby, but her face wore a twisted grin. Guess the bears didn't get you, she sneered. Her words sent a wave of fear through me as memories of that night in the mountains flooded back. She even threatened to spread a video of me unless I paid her. Though her threat made no sense, her presence terrified me. She climbed into a car and drove away, leaving me shaken. I called my father, who was furious. Using his resources, he discovered evidence of tax evasion and fraud in John's business. When confronted, John had no choice but to admit his guilt. His mistress, Lena, was shocked to learn she was tied to his shady dealings. Their lies and schemes unraveled, leaving them exposed and humiliated. John's accounts were frozen, and he lost everything, even his mother. Susan, abandoned him, saying, "You're no son of mine." Both of them were left with nothing, their selfishness leading to their complete downfall. Despite everything, I focused on healing and finding a new purpose. My experience inspired me to help others escape toxic families and rebuild their lives. With my parents' support, I opened a refuge center in the family retreat where I'd once been rescued. It became a safe haven for those who needed a fresh start. I even earned a counseling qualification to guide others through their pain. Over time, the refuge grew, welcoming people who needed a safe place to heal. One day, a woman arrived, escaping her abusive family. I reassured her, "You've done so well to get out. I'm glad I left when I did, too." Her tears turned to a soft smile as I reminded her it was okay to acknowledge the pain and set boundaries. With time, I began to smile again, finding joy in helping others rebuild their lives. Susan, Megan, and John continued to struggle, but I felt no pity. They were simply reaping the consequences of their own actions. Meanwhile, the refuge became a place of hope, ensuring no one else would have to face the kind of pain I once endured. I never imagined my life would change so drastically. Growing up, my parents had been my rock, my constant support. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy. When I lost them in a tragic car accident just 2 years after my marriage to Liam, my world fell apart. Their absence left a void that I thought could never be filled. At first, Liam was supportive, holding me as I cried myself to sleep night after night, but things began to shift subtly, like a shadow creeping in at the edges of my life. Liam came from a well-off family. His parents, Harold and Marjorie, were influential, wealthy, and, most of all, cold. They had never approved of me. Marjorie once told me at a family gathering, "You're lucky my son sees something in you. Don't forget where you come from." I brushed it off then, thinking it was just her way of asserting dominance. But after my parents' death, her words seemed to echo in every interaction we had. Initially, I moved in with Liam's family temporarily while we searched for a new place. What started as temporary, though, turned into something far more sinister. Marjorie's disdain turned into outright hostility. She assigned me chores around the house as if I were the live-in maid. "If you're staying under this roof, you'll need to pull your weight," she'd say with a saccharine smile that barely masked her contempt. At first, I complied without complaint. After all, I was grieving and didn't want to cause trouble. But soon, it became clear that this wasn't just about helping out. Harold and Marjorie treated me as if I were beneath them. They'd host lavish dinners, inviting their high society friends, while I was relegated to serving drinks and cleaning up afterward. Once, during one of these events, Marjorie's voice cut through the room like a whip. "Sarah, dear, you missed a spot," she sneered, pointing to a speck of dust on the mantel. The guests laughed, and my cheeks burned with humiliation. Liam, standing nearby, said nothing. I tried to talk to Liam about it that night. "Your parents treat me like I'm their servant," I said, my voice trembling. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "They're just old-fashioned. Sarah, don't take it personally. It's their house, after all." "Old-fashioned?" I repeated incredulously. "Liam, they're demeaning me, can't you see that?" "Just let it go," he said, turning away. That was the beginning of the wedge that started to grow between us. One evening, Marjorie's friend, Evelyn, came over for tea. I was in the kitchen, preparing a tray, when I overheard their conversation. "Honestly, Marjorie," Evelyn said, "why does she even stay here? You'd think she'd have some pride." Marjorie's laugh was icy. "She has nowhere else to go. Poor thing, she's just lucky we're so charitable." The words cut through me like shards of glass. I wanted to march into the room and confront them, but I knew it would only make things worse. Instead, I stayed in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. As the months passed, their treatment grew worse. Harold would make snide comments about how people like me didn't understand the value of hard work, despite the fact that I had been juggling 2 jobs to help Liam through college before we got married. Marjorie, meanwhile, seemed to delight in finding new ways to humiliate me. Once, during a family dinner, she asked, "Sarah, do you even know which fork to use?" The table erupted in laughter, and I felt like sinking into the floor. But the breaking point came one fateful evening. Harold announced that his boss, Mr. Grant, would be coming over for dinner. "This is an important night," he said, looking pointedly at me. "Try not to embarrass us, Sarah." That night, as I set the table with trembling hands, I resolved to endure whatever insults came my way. For Liam's sake, I told myself, but deep down, a part of me wondered how much longer I could take it. Little did I know, That evening would change everything. As the months wore on, my situation with Thomas's family continued to worsen. Despite my best efforts to blend into their world and earn their respect, nothing I did seemed good enough. Each day blurred into the next, with tasks piling up and the disdain from my in-laws becoming more overt. I found myself waking up before sunrise to prepare breakfast for the entire family. By the time I sat down to eat, Thomas's mother, Elaine, would click her tongue disapprovingly. "This toast is overdone," she'd complain. Or, "Didn't I tell you I prefer my eggs sunny side up?" It didn't matter how much effort I put in, she always found a flaw. Thomas's father, Richard, wasn't much better. He often treated me like invisible help. If Elaine had guests over, Richard would bark at me to refill glasses or serve hors d'oeuvres, all while ignoring my existence otherwise. I felt like a stranger in the home I had once thought of as my refuge. Thomas, once my biggest supporter, now seemed indifferent to my struggles. When I tried to talk to him, he would brush me off. "They're just set in their ways," he'd say. "You've got to learn to pick your battles, Mia." But how could I pick my battles when I felt like I was fighting a war on all fronts? My breaking point came one evening when Elaine invited some of her friends over for a dinner party. She spent the entire day barking orders at me, making sure the house was spotless and the menu impeccable. I was exhausted by the time the guests arrived, but I put on a polite smile and carried out the task she assigned me. Toward the end of the evening, one of Elaine's friends asked about my family. I hesitated for a moment, then explained that I had lost my parents at a young age and had grown up in foster care. The room fell silent, and I immediately regretted sharing. Elaine broke the awkward tension with a forced laugh. "Well, that explains why you're so good at handling things on your own," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Her friends chuckled politely, but I could see the judgment in their eyes. For the rest of the evening, I felt like I was on display, a curiosity for these well-heeled women to dissect. Later that night, I confronted Thomas in our room. "Your mother humiliated me tonight," I said, my voice trembling. Thomas barely looked up from his phone. "You're overreacting, Mia. She didn't mean anything by it." "How can you say that? You heard her." He sighed heavily, as if I were the one inconveniencing him. "You need to stop making everything about you. My parents have done so much for us." I stared at him in disbelief. "So that gives them the right to treat me like I'm beneath them?" Thomas didn't answer, and I realized that the man I had married, the man who had once promised to stand by me no matter what, was no longer the same. The next day, while running errands for Elaine, I stopped at a small cafe to grab a coffee. As I waited in line, I overheard a conversation at the table behind me. A man in a sharp suit was speaking animatedly about a new charity project he was spearheading. His voice was warm and inviting, and for a moment, I felt a pang of longing. When I turned to glance at him, our eyes met. He smiled, and I quickly looked away, embarrassed. Little did I know, that chance encounter would change the trajectory of my life. That evening, Elaine announced with great fanfare that Richard's boss, Mr. Harrington, would be joining us for dinner the following week. She was in a flurry of excitement, directing preparations like a military general. "This is a big opportunity for your father-in-law," she said. "Don't screw it up, Mia." I wanted to roll my eyes, but I bit my tongue. I knew this dinner would be another test, and I braced myself for whatever was to come. The days leading up to the dinner were grueling. I spent hours cleaning every corner of the house, polishing silverware, and perfecting recipes under Elaine's watchful eye. By the time the evening arrived, I was too tired to even feel nervous. As the guests began to arrive, I tried to stay in the background, serving drinks and making myself as inconspicuous as possible. But when Mr. Harrington walked through the door, my heart stopped. It was the same man I had seen at the cafe. He paused when he saw me, his brow furrowing slightly. "Mia?" Everyone turned to look at me. I froze, unsure of how to respond. "You two know each other?" Richard asked, his tone laced with suspicion. Mr. Harrington's face broke into a smile. "Oh, we go way back, don't we, Mia?" The room buzzed with curiosity, and I could feel Elaine's eyes burning into me. I had no idea how to explain this twist of fate, but one thing was clear: everything was about to change. The moment hung heavy in the air as everyone waited for me to respond. My mind raced, trying to process Mr. Harrington's words. "We did go way back, but not in the way anyone in this room might imagine." "Why yes," I stammered. "Mr. Harrington knew my parents." Richard's eyes narrowed, clearly suspicious. Elaine, ever the perfectionist host, tried to diffuse the tension with a forced laugh. "Well, what a small world. Please, come in, Mr. Harrington. As dinner progressed, the conversation seemed to center around Mr. Harrington. As everyone fawned over his stories of success, I quietly served dishes, keeping my head down and avoiding his gaze, but every so often, I'd catch him watching me with a curious expression. Finally, as the evening began to wind down, Mr. Harrington asked to speak with me privately. Elaine looked displeased, but she didn't dare argue with someone of his status. We stepped into the hallway, and he turned to me with an incredulous expression. "Mia, is it really you? I can't believe this. How have you been?" Hearing the genuine concern in his voice brought tears to my eyes. "It's been difficult," I admitted. He nodded, his brow furrowing. "After your parents passed, I lost touch with you. I tried to find out where you'd gone, but I ended up in the foster system," I said quietly. His face fell. "I'm so sorry, Mia. Your parents were dear friends of mine. They would be heartbroken to know what you've been through." I didn't know what to say. The flood of memories from my childhood, coupled with the overwhelming kindness in his voice, made me feel a mixture of relief and sorrow. Mr. Harrington's concern didn't end there. As he prepared to leave, he asked Richard and Elaine if I could see him to his car. They reluctantly agreed, clearly eager to maintain their connection to such an influential figure. As we walked down the driveway, he turned to me and said, "Mia, you don't belong here. They treat you like you're nothing, but I can see that you've grown into a strong, capable woman. Your parents would be proud of you." Tears welled up in my eyes again. No one had spoken to me like this in years. "I don't have anywhere else to go," I said, my voice trembling. He placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You have me now. I'll help you get back on your feet, I promise." Over the next few days, Mr. Harrington's words stayed with me. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. I began to imagine a life beyond the walls of Thomas's family home, a life where I could reclaim my sense of self-worth. But breaking free wasn't going to be easy. I knew that Elaine and Richard would never let me go without a fight. They saw me as nothing more than a convenient housekeeper, someone who could be easily controlled. That's when Mr. Harrington reached out to me with a plan. One afternoon, while Elaine and Richard were out, I received a call from Mr. Harrington. He told me about a job opening at his company, one that he believed I'd be perfect for. "I know it's a lot to process," he said, "but I want you to think about it. This could be your chance to start fresh." I hesitated. The idea of working for someone as accomplished as Mr. Harrington was both exciting and intimidating, but more than that, I feared how Thomas and his family would react if they found out. "You deserve this, Mia," he added. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." That evening, as I tried to muster the courage to tell Thomas about the opportunity, a confrontation erupted. Elaine stormed into the kitchen, furious that I had forgotten to polish the silverware for an upcoming party. "You can't even do the simplest tasks right," she snapped. Before I could respond, Thomas chimed in. "Mom's right, Mia. You've been slipping up a lot lately." His words felt like a slap in the face. After everything I had endured, this was how they saw me? Something inside me snapped. I thought of Mr. Harrington's offer, of his belief in me, and of the life I could have if I was brave enough to take a step forward. I looked Thomas in the eye and said, "I'm done." His brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "I'm done being treated like a servant. I'm done living in a house where I'm not respected. I'm leaving." The room fell silent. Elaine and Richard stared at me in shock, and for once, Thomas had no words. That night, I packed my things and left. As I walked out the door, I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let anyone hold me back anymore. I stood on the sidewalk outside Thomas's family home, clutching my small bag of belongings. The house loomed behind me, cold and unwelcoming, but as I took my first steps away, I felt the weight begin to lift from my shoulders. That night, I stayed at a small motel. Using the little savings I had managed to squirrel away, I replayed the events of the day in my mind, wondering if I had made the right decision. Doubts crept in, but then I thought of Mr. Harrington's words. "You don't belong there, Mia. You're capable of so much more." I resolved to believe in him and in myself. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrington to let him know I had left. He was relieved and immediately arranged for me to meet him at his office downtown. Walking into his sleek corporate building, I felt out of place. Everyone was dressed sharply, moving with purpose, and I couldn't help but feel self-conscious in my worn-out clothes. But when Mr. Harrington greeted me with a warm smile, some of my nervousness melted away. "I'm so glad you came," he said, ushering me into his office. I've been thinking about how we can get you started on the right foot. He explained the job he had in mind for me, an entry-level administrative role. It wasn't glamorous, but it was an opportunity to learn, grow, and, most importantly, to earn my independence. You've got potential, Mia, he said. I see it. This is just the beginning. Starting at the company was daunting. I had little experience, and the learning curve was steep. There were moments when I doubted myself, times when I felt overwhelmed by the demands of the job, but every time I wanted to give up, I thought of where I had come from and where I wanted to go. Mr. Harrington became a mentor to me, offering guidance and encouragement whenever I needed it. Slowly but surely, I began to find my footing. I made friends among my colleagues, who were supportive and kind. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. As I settled into my new life, I began to confront the pain of my past. Losing my parents had left a hole in my heart, and the years of mistreatment had made me doubt my worth. But through therapy and self-reflection, I started to heal. One evening, I found myself sorting through a box of my parents' old belongings that Mr. Harrington had kept for me. Among the photos and keepsakes was a letter my mother had written to me years ago. It read, "Mia, life will have its challenges, but never forget how strong and capable you are. You have a kind heart, and that will take you far. Always believe in yourself, even when it feels impossible." Reading her words brought tears to my eyes. I realized that, despite everything, I was living the life my parents would have wanted for me, a life of dignity, hope, and possibility. Several months later, I ran into Thomas at a coffee shop. He looked surprised to see me, and, to my astonishment, a little ashamed. "Mia," he said awkwardly, "I've been meaning to reach out." I crossed my arms, unsure of what to say. "Listen, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't treat you right. None of us did. I'm sorry." His apology was unexpected, and while part of me wanted to lash out, I chose a different path. "Thank you," I said simply. "I hope you've learned from it." Walking away from him, I felt a sense of closure. I no longer needed validation from Thomas or his family. I had found my own strength. 1 year after leaving Thomas's family, I had built a life I was proud of. I had been promoted at work, moved into a cozy apartment, and even started taking classes to further my education. Mr. Harrington remained a guiding presence in my life, and I was grateful for his kindness. But more than that, I was proud of myself, for taking the leap, for persevering, and for rediscovering my worth. As I sat on my balcony one evening, watching the sunset, I thought about my journey. Life hadn't been easy, but it had taught me resilience. I whispered into the fading light, "Thank you, Mom and Dad. I'm finally living the life you always wanted for me," and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. I had always thought life would be smooth after getting married. I grew up in a loving but modest home, and despite the loss of my parents in my late teens, I carried their values with me: kindness, humility, and strength. My husband, Ethan, had swept me off my feet during our college years. He was charming, ambitious, and seemingly the perfect partner. At first, his family seemed welcoming enough. His mother, Eleanor, would flash a polite smile, though it never quite reached her eyes. His father, Gerald, was a man of few words, but his disapproving glances often lingered a little too long. Still, I chose to see the best in them because I loved Ethan. We moved into the large family estate soon after our wedding, as per Eleanor's insistence. She claimed it was only temporary until we could save for our own home. It seemed generous at first, but little did I know, I was walking into a gilded cage. Things started subtly, almost imperceptibly. I began to notice how Eleanor would frequently compare me to their family friends' daughters-in-law, who were doctors, lawyers, or heirs to substantial fortunes. "You know, Olivia managed to host a charity gala for 300 guests all by herself," Eleanor once said, her tone dripping with feigned admiration. "Isn't that impressive, Ethan?" I smiled, feeling the sting but brushing it off. "That does sound impressive," I replied. "She's a natural," Eleanor continued, her gaze cutting into me. "Not everyone has the upbringing for it." Ethan didn't defend me. He didn't even notice. It was easier to let these comments slide than to start a conflict. At least, that's what I told myself. Soon, Eleanor began treating me less like a family member and more like staff. She'd leave lists of tasks for me to complete during the day: ironing their clothes, polishing the silverware, and preparing dinner. Initially, I tried to comply, thinking it was a way to earn her approval, but no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. One evening, after spending hours preparing a 3-course meal for the family, Eleanor frowned as she tasted the soup. "It's too salty," she declared, pushing the bowl aside. "Do it again tomorrow, and please, follow the recipe this time." Ethan said nothing. He didn't even meet my eyes. Ethan's long hours at work left me alone in a house that didn't feel like home. I tried to focus on hobbies, even attempted to make friends in the area, but Eleanor discouraged me. "Your place is here," she said one day when I mentioned wanting to join a local art class. "There's plenty to keep you busy at home." I realized then that she didn't see me as her son's wife, an equal partner in life. She saw me as an inconvenience, a mistake Ethan had made by marrying beneath their station. But I still held on to hope. I loved Ethan, and I believed he loved me. Surely, he would see how his family was treating me and put a stop to it, wouldn't he? The turning point came during a family dinner. Gerald invited one of his business associates, a powerful and wealthy man named Mr. Hawkins. As we prepared for the evening, Eleanor's instructions became relentless. "Make sure the linens are pressed perfectly," she snapped, "and don't embarrass us in front of Mr. Hawkins. He values class, and you're still learning." Her words stung, but I nodded and set the table with care. When Mr. Hawkins arrived, I was introduced briefly, before being relegated to the kitchen. I overheard snippets of their conversation as I served hors d'oeuvres. "She's very lucky to be part of this family," Gerald was saying. "Ethan is too kind. He could have married anyone, but he has such a big heart." The implication was clear. I was a charity case. My face burned with humiliation, but I kept my composure. The night dragged on, and by the end, I was left cleaning up alone. Ethan didn't even offer to help. I finally broke down in the dimly lit kitchen, tears streaming down my face as I scrubbed dishes, wondering how my life had come to this. I didn't know it then, but that dinner would set in motion a series of events that would change everything. The aftermath of the dinner left me emotionally drained. My days were starting to blur together, each one a copy of the last: cleaning, cooking, and being invisible in a house that should have been my sanctuary. But something about that night lingered in the back of my mind, an invisible weight pressing down on me. A week after the dinner, Eleanor summoned me to the living room. She was seated on the ornate couch, a cup of tea in her hand. Gerald stood near the fireplace, his arms crossed, wearing his usual look of quiet disdain. "We'll be hosting Mr. Hawkins again," Eleanor announced. "It's important that we make a good impression this time. Gerald has been working on a significant deal with him, and we can't afford to let anything go wrong." I swallowed hard. "Of course, what do you need from me?" "Everything to be perfect," she replied, her voice cool. "And this time, try not to look so plain. Presentation matters." I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment, but nodded. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel the weight of their expectations. I wasn't just a wife in their eyes, I was a pawn in their endless pursuit of social status. The day of the dinner arrived, and I worked tirelessly from dawn. The house gleamed, the table was set with the finest china, and the aroma of roasted lamb filled the air. By the time the guests arrived, I was exhausted, but Eleanor insisted I be presentable. As Mr. Hawkins stepped through the door, his presence seemed to command the room. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and carried an air of authority. His sharp eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. For a brief moment, I thought I saw something flicker across his face, a mix of recognition and shock, but just as quickly, it was gone. Dinner began, and I quietly served the courses, avoiding eye contact with anyone. As I placed a dish in front of Mr. Hawkins, he looked up and said, "Thank you, miss. Have we met before?" The question caught me off guard. I stammered, I don't think so." He tilted his head slightly, as though trying to place me. "You look familiar." Eleanor intervened, her tone sharp. "She's Ethan's wife. She tends to stay out of the spotlight." Mr. Hawkins didn't respond but gave me a small, polite nod. The rest of the meal passed uneventfully, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, studying me. The next morning, while cleaning up the dining room, I heard a knock at the front door. Expecting it to be a delivery, I opened it without much thought. To my surprise, it was Mr. Hawkins. "Good morning," he said, his tone polite but firm. "May I speak with you?" I hesitated. "Of course, should I get Gerald?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I came to see you." He stepped inside, and I led him to the sitting room, my mind racing. What could he possibly want? As he sat down, he studied me carefully. "I was up all night thinking," he began. "I couldn't shake the feeling that I've seen you before." I frowned, unsure where this was going. "I don't think we've met." Perhaps not directly, he said, pulling out his phone, but does this look familiar? He showed me a photograph. My breath caught in my throat. It was of my parents. They were younger, smiling brightly at what looked like a formal event, and standing next to them was a younger version of Mr. Hawkins. How do you have this? I whispered. I was close friends with your parents many years ago, he said, his voice softening. Your father and I worked together, and your mother was like a sister to me. When I saw you last night, I couldn't believe my eyes. You're their daughter, aren't you? Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded. Yes, but they passed away years ago. He leaned back, his expression a mix of sorrow and relief. I had no idea. They spoke of you often, how proud they were of you. I lost touch with them after they moved, and I always regretted it. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Mr. Hawkins' words were like a lifeline, pulling me out of the darkness I had been drowning in. He asked about my life, and I hesitated to share too much, but something about his genuine concern made me open up. I'm glad I found you, he said finally. Your parents were extraordinary people, and I owe them so much. If there's ever anything you need, don't hesitate to ask. I nodded, still overwhelmed by the revelation. As he left, he gave me one last look and said, "You deserve better than this." Those words echoed in my mind long after he was gone. In the days following Mr. Hawkins' visit, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. His words lingered in my mind, offering a faint sense of hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I wasn't entirely alone in this world. My parents' memory, through him, became a thread connecting me to something greater, a sense of belonging that I had lost. Eleanor, however, wasn't blind to the change in me. While I continued my duties, something about my demeanor must have shifted. One morning, as I was scrubbing the kitchen counters, she approached me with her usual air of superiority. "You've been awfully quiet lately," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Not that you're one for conversation, but you seem distracted." I shook my head quickly. "I've just been tired." She studied me for a moment before nodding. "Well, keep your focus. We're hosting another dinner next week. Gerald's promotion depends on securing Mr. Hawkins' partnership." My heart sank. Another dinner? The idea of being paraded around like a servant again made me nauseous. But then I remembered Mr. Hawkins' parting words, "You deserve better than this." A few days before the scheduled dinner, I found an envelope addressed to me on the hall table. It wasn't the type of thing Eleanor or Gerald would bother with. They never acknowledged my personal life. Curious, I opened it and was stunned to find a handwritten letter from Mr. Hawkins. "Dear Ava, it was truly a shock to see you again, but also a blessing. Your parents were dear to me, and I can't bear the thought of their daughter being treated unfairly. I have arranged for an opportunity that I believe could change your circumstances. If you're willing, come to my office this Friday at noon. I'll explain everything. Warm regards, Daniel Hawkins." My hands trembled as I read the letter. Could this really be happening? Was this the lifeline I had been praying for? Friday arrived, and I could barely contain my nerves. I told Eleanor I had errands to run and left the house, clutching the letter like a talisman. As I entered Mr. Hawkins' office building, my heart raced. The receptionist guided me to his office, where he greeted me with a warm smile. "I'm glad you came," he said, gesturing for me to sit. He explained that he had connections in a nearby nonprofit organization that supported women in difficult situations. He believed they could help me build a new life, one where I could rediscover my sense of self-worth and independence. "But there's more," he said, leaning forward. "Your parents left behind a trust fund in your name. I helped them set it up years ago, but I lost track of it when they passed. It's modest, but it's enough to give you a fresh start." Tears streamed down my face as I listened. The idea of starting over felt like a distant dream finally within reach. That evening, I returned home with renewed resolve. I knew Eleanor and Gerald would never let me go easily. They thrived on control. But now, I had something they didn't know about, a plan, a future, and the means to escape. I began quietly packing a few belongings, hiding them in the attic. Each day, I worked discreetly to gather what I would need. The upcoming dinner felt like the perfect cover. While their attention was focused on impressing Mr. Hawkins, I could slip away unnoticed. As the dinner approached, I found myself smiling more often, even humming as I worked. Eleanor noticed but misinterpreted it as compliance. "Good," she said with a rare nod of approval. "You're finally understanding your place." If only she knew. The evening of the dinner arrived, bringing with it a storm of nerves and anticipation. Eleanor was in full command mode, barking orders at everyone to ensure perfection. Gerald, for his part, was too busy rehearsing his business pitch to Mr. Hawkins to notice anything out of the ordinary. I moved about the house methodically, my heart racing with each passing moment. Tonight would be my last night here. Guests began arriving, including Mr. Hawkins, who greeted me with a knowing smile. His presence was a reminder of the escape plan I'd meticulously crafted. The atmosphere in the dining room buzzed with polite chatter and the clinking of glasses. As expected, Eleanor had instructed me to stay in the kitchen, serving dishes and refilling drinks. But Mr. Hawkins wasn't content to let me stay in the shadows. "Ava," he called out when I entered with a platter of appetizers, "why don't you join us? After all, we've got much to talk about." Eleanor's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. "Oh, there's no need for that," she said hastily, laughing nervously. "She's here to help, not to dine." But Mr. Hawkins wasn't deterred. "I insist," he said, his tone polite but firm. "Ava is like family to me. I won't have her treated otherwise." The room fell silent. Gerald shifted uncomfortably in his chair, while Eleanor sputtered for a response. Reluctantly, they allowed me to sit. I could feel Eleanor's eyes burning into me, but I kept my composure, buoyed by Mr. Hawkins' support. As the meal progressed, the conversation turned to my parents. Mr. Hawkins shared stories about them, how my father had been his closest friend and how my mother's kindness had touched everyone she met. For the first time in years, I felt like they weren't just a distant memory, they were alive in the room, in the words of someone who had truly known them. It was then that Mr. Hawkins dropped the bombshell. "Ava," he said, addressing me directly, "have you told them about the trust fund your parents left for you?" My heart stopped. I glanced at Eleanor and Gerald, whose expressions twisted from confusion to shock. "Trust fund?" Gerald repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. "Yes," Mr. Hawkins continued, turning his gaze to them. "Her parents left her a considerable amount to ensure she'd never have to rely on anyone else. I'm appalled to see how that generosity has been ignored." Eleanor stammered, trying to regain control. We weren't aware. She never mentioned it." I met her gaze for the first time that evening, my voice steady. "Because you never asked." The tension in the room was palpable. Gerald tried to defuse it, laughing nervously. "Well, this is a misunderstanding. Of course, Ava will have access to her funds. Isn't that right, Eleanor?" But Eleanor's veneer cracked. "She's ungrateful. After everything we've done for her, giving her a roof, food, this is how she repays us?" Mr. Hawkins interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "If by roof and food, you mean exploitation and mistreatment, then yes, Eleanor, this is how she repays you, by reclaiming her life." For the first time, I saw Eleanor rendered speechless. Gerald, too, slumped in his chair, his bluster evaporating. After dinner, I quietly gathered the bag I had packed and headed for the door. Mr. Hawkins followed, offering me a ride to the apartment he had arranged for me through his nonprofit connections. As I left, I felt a mixture of emotions: relief, empowerment, and a bittersweet sense of closure. Eleanor and Gerald didn't even try to stop me. They must have realized their grip on me was broken. The next morning, I woke up in a small but cozy apartment, my apartment. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I started attending workshops at the nonprofit, where I learned skills to rebuild my life. Mr. Hawkins continued to be a mentor, guiding me through the process of managing the trust fund and pursuing my dreams. Most importantly, I began to find myself again. I wasn't just someone's servant or charity case. I was Ava, a woman with a future. Months later, I sat in a small cafe, sipping coffee and reading a book. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The weight of the past had lifted, replaced by a sense of possibility. I thought of my parents often, not with sadness, but with gratitude. They had given me the strength to endure, and now I was finally living the life they had wanted for me. As for Eleanor and Gerald, I heard through the grapevine that Gerald didn't get his promotion. It seemed karma had its own way of balancing the scales. But I wasn't focused on them anymore. My life was ahead of me, and I was ready to embrace it.